Women's Studies Advocacy Council FIESTA event. Thank you for coming today to listen to the stories that often go untold, unheard, unvoiced, or unappreciated. There are many of us here today who have our own stories that we don't talk about, the stories that maybe our closest friends know, the story that we tell our best friend the light version of it and we cry on our own. And then we also have the stories with maniacal laughter where you're crying in your car, driving from Fry's to home, and just reliving a moment of joy that maybe some people just don't get, except that one friend that you call in that moment. So today is a day to honor those stories. I'm here with Dr. Jennifer Croissant, the department head for the Department of Gender and Women's Studies, and with Vice President of the Women's Studies Advocacy Council, Mel Blumenthal, who is also one of the organizers and curators for this event. I'm gonna not talk because today is really not about me, which as an only child is hard to admit. But enjoy, welcome, thank you for coming. And at the end of the event, we're gonna have a champagne toast over at the Dutch Eatery, which is about a block west of here. So you're more than welcome to come and join, even if you didn't RSVP for that. We're prepared for you. Last thing, because I have to do my WOSAC pitch, we are offering membership specials today, $15 for students and $40 for full members. So if you're interested in joining WOSAC and contributing to this organization, we're creating a smoking deal for you right now. Also, for those of you who are sitting in the plaza, you'll notice the pavers on the ground. We've got small pavers that are running at $225 for today, and large pavers running at $700. If you'd like to give thanks and recognition to the people in your lives that will last longer than flowers or chocolate, these could be one of your answers. Again, thank you so much for coming, and I'm going to turn the floor over to Dr. Croissant.
Thank you so much for being here. Thanks be for this absolutely glorious weather. We couldn't have asked for anything better. I also want to say a thank you to WOSAC, President November Papaleo-Prentice, Mal Blumenthal, Vice President and one of the key organizers for this event, and of course the indomitable Lee Spencer, who makes things run for GWS.
She's in the corner.
She's hiding in the corner. Wave, Lee. I am super pleased to be here with this hopefully first annual event, and I'm really happy to be here to share the power of stories. What I'm hoping is that this kind of storytelling thing will help us oppose cruelty by promoting kindness. Will help oppose avarice by promoting generosity. Will oppose mendacity by positing truth. Here's your word for the day. Oppose flagitiousness, that's a good one, flagitiousness, by promoting integrity. That gives you a hint on what it means. Opposing despair with joy. We have a lot to be joyful for, even if we don't necessarily always feel it. Coming from Pennsylvania, I'm familiar with the Quaker tradition, and they have a phrase of speaking truth to power. And I'd also like to encourage us to be able to speak beauty to power. And there's also an idea that comes here about bearing witness. And bearing witness does not mean to stand idly by. It means to stand against and stand with against injustice, to stand with and stand against those who are facing pain and suffering, and to stand and bear witness and to establish truth. And that's one of the projects of the university, that's one of the projects of Gender and Women's Studies, and I think that's one of our projects today. And I'm really happy to be able to welcome you to this event.
Great. Kick us off, Mel.
All right. So hello, my name is Mel Blumenthal. I am the Vice President of WOSAC, as they said. I am also the Community Outreach Coordinator for FIST, Female Storytellers. All right, some of you are familiar, I love it. So I know a little bit about storytelling. So why storytelling today? Storytelling is actually one of our, if not the oldest, art form. It is how we facilitate connection with each other, as the gambit of human connection is laid bare. It is how we communicate our passions, our fears, our tragedies, and our triumphs. And in a time where it seems we are at our most polarized and our most divided, stories are what can bridge the chasms of our differences and remind us that at our core, we are all human. Storytelling is also about community building and strengthening the ties that bind. And as you all sit here today and listen to our 5 incredible speakers, I am confident that at some point, each and every one of you will be saying yourself, "Me too." Now more than ever is a time for us to be building that community and embracing our community. And on behalf of myself and all of the members of WOSAC, we thank you for being a part of our community here today. Welcome, and without further ado, let's get this show started. So it is my honor to bring up our first speaker. Patricia is a professor in gender and women's studies who has devoted her career to promoting equity in higher education, and anybody sitting here who has taken a class from her will know that. She is one of the founding members of the UA Department, Gender and Women's Studies, and the Southwest Institute for Research on Women, otherwise known as CIRO. She is one of the founding members of the Honors College, and she is the true embodiment of all things FIESTA. So it is my honor to bring to the stage Dean Emeritus of the Honors College, Dr. Patricia McCorkadale.
Thank you. August 1978. I was sitting at a typewriter making corrections on my dissertation when the phone rang. It was Myra Dinnerstein. I'm the chair of Women's Studies program. We are so excited that you are here and will be teaching courses cross-listed in Women's Studies. Wow, this was big news. One, no one had mentioned that there was a program in Women's Studies during my recruitment visit or in the negotiations around the courses I would teach. I didn't even know they fit into Women's Studies. I had just moved to the U of A from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Wisconsin didn't have a Women's Studies program. I was part of a feminist reading group organized by graduate students. A whole program in Women's Studies was amazing. 2, I was thrilled that Myra and other faculty were excited that I was at the U of A. No one in sociology showed much excitement. I was given the keys to an office and some supplies and went to work. I picked the office adjacent to the men's room in hopes of meeting my 17 male colleagues. A few whom I had met on my recruitment visit said hello, but I didn't feel welcomed. The only conversations I had were with the other 4 new hires, 3 of whom I knew from Madison. Myra invited me to come to a welcome luncheon to meet the other Women's Studies faculty. She explained that each woman would introduce herself, her teaching and research interests, a great way to make connections on campus. This event brought me into a community of solidarity, support, and activism that changed my life. I became part of a group of young scholars scattered across departments who came together through our commitment to feminism. Our work centered on how questions, assumptions, methodologies, and our disciplines were transformed by including women's experiences and perspectives. We sought to build alliances across disciplines that undermined the very structure of the university, and to support each other in our personal and professional lives. I was one of the first women hired to teach women's studies. My dissertation focused on how gender influenced educational and career aspirations. This qualified me in the eyes of sociology to teach sociology of women, male and female roles, and the sociology of work and family. All new preparations for my first year. I thought that male and female roles sounded like an odd title. Most people use the term sex roles. I asked the department head if the course could be retitled. He told me that sex roles was originally proposed, but the Arizona Board of Regents didn't want sex in the catalog. I began to wonder how I, a young woman studying human sexuality, would fit in. Early on, I presented my research on sexuality at a sociology brown bag. Afterward, several senior faculty members came to speak with me about my presentation. One commented, "You seem like such a nice young girl. I was surprised to learn that you study sex." Another asked me, "How can you say those words out loud?" These were words like genitals, intercourse, breasts. Later, when I was interviewed for a newspaper article on sex workers, another colleague came by to warn me, "This is not the kind of publicity you want. You have ruined your reputation." I shared these comments with my women's studies colleagues, and they encouraged me to explore less controversial research agendas. Teaching women's studies courses strengthened my interest in the gendered nature of work, family, and schools. Myra learned of a National Institute of Education grant competition on girls in science. She helped me to apply for a grant on how parents, teachers, and peers influence Latinas' interests in science and math. Literally, she sat with me, explained what was needed in each section, showed how to build and justify a budget, and edited each word. The project was funded and was the first grant to go through CIRU, the New Research Institute. Women's studies faculty came together to support and mentor each other. Most of us were the only feminist woman in a predominantly male department. The university had not yet established mentoring systems. We were drawn together by our feminist perspectives to share our experiences and survival strategies. Eliana Rivera, who had fought for promotion, taught me to think strategically about reviewers when I came up. Sid Smith encouraged me to network at conferences and share my work with senior scholars. Their advice and wise counsel, along with that of many others, were crucial in my becoming the first woman to earn tenure in sociology. Male faculty members and administrators were uneasy whenever they saw a table of women having coffee or lunch. The mere sight of so many women together evoked fear, since they were used to academia as a boys-only club. They would make jokes about how we were cooking up trouble, or ask, "What are you plotting now?" And they were right. We were planning to change the world as they knew it. Myra was an amazing strategic thinker. She aligned herself with many of the powerful men on campus and asked for their advice. She gained political knowledge about how to work the systems at the university and enlisted these power brokers in supporting women's studies. My administrative career and leadership owe much to learning from Myra's example about negotiating, building coalitions, and power systems. In 1981, we embarked on a series of projects to integrate women into the university curriculum. We were shocked when we polled undergraduate students and found that the vast majority had never taken a course that contained any material on women. We were reaching our students only through our women's studies courses. Given our small numbers, our impact on the curriculum was and could only remain small. Because we sought a lasting impact, the first project focused on UA tenured faculty, nearly all men. Myra's strategic vision encouraged us to recruit male colleagues from our departments so that we could increase their awareness and valuation of teaching and scholarship on women. From this work, I actually got colleagues to work with in my own department. Several powerful men in the university believed that this integration project was ideal, the first step in eliminating women's studies. I remember then Provost Al Weaver at a fancy dinner celebrating the first curriculum integration grant. "Well, I guess I won't be seeing you around much any longer." We women looked at each other and at him blankly. "Once this project is over, we won't need women's studies any longer." Little did he know that our long revolution was just beginning. This story is the beginning of a project that I am leading that will build a history of the founding mothers of GWS. I want to thank WOSAC and GWS for their support in creating a digital archive that will host photos, writing, interviews, and stories about our collective work to create a space for feminist scholarship and teaching. I hope to speak with many of you to gather your stories of our struggles and triumphs that we want to preserve for future generations of feminists. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. It's interesting to think about, but without Patricia and some of the names that she mentioned, a lot of the classes that myself and maybe some of you have taken and some of the degrees that many of you hold would not be possible without you. So thank you for your story and your enduring legacy here at the university. Our next storyteller is no stranger to the storytelling world. A regular contributor at FIESTA, Female Storytellers, and fan favorite. Sierra, unfortunately, is going to be leaving us to pursue this tiny little thing called a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity and her dream job, where she will be moving to Oregon. Tucson's loss will certainly be Oregon's gain, with a story that never fails to inspire hope and redefines new beginnings. Please welcome to the stage the irreplaceable Sierra Sadowal.
I snapped a quick selfie from the driver's seat. In the photo, I looked far less ready for a trip of a lifetime and more like I wanted to just crawl back onto the couch, eat ice cream from the carton, and binge watch old TV shows on Netflix. Another quick glance around my Jeep assured me I was ready. My suitcase stowed in the back, packed and repacked the night before, followed none of the advice a friend had offered. I figured if I had the bare minimum, bras, several pair of mother would approve what if you're in an accident undies, jeans, t-shirt, deodorant, toothpaste, and conditioner, I could survive indefinitely, if unfashionably. Doubt and my grandmother's genetic contribution to my existence sent me back to my closet. My father's mother, delicately demanding, suffered her final stroke when I was 8, with trademark propriety. Seated primly in her baby blue 64 Oldsmobile, still parked in her driveway, her hands clutched precisely at 10 and 2. Her hair dyed an impossible black once a month, and aggressively styled into pin curls every Thursday, was tidily tucked under her veiled hat, her brown sheath dress impeccably accessorized with creamy gloves, pearls, shoes, and handbag. Grandmother believed in dressing slightly better than any occasion called for. I remember her Sunday mornings tisks of disapproval over my messy hair, my rumpled dress, or my scuffed shoes. Still, whenever I think, good enough, as I dress for a new experience, her influence usually sends me back for a quick touch-up. So I tossed a couple of dressier things into my bag in case I was invited to interview for my dream job or attend a Hollywood premiere. I had no idea how those things might happen, but I didn't want to look like a schmuck wherever I landed. So I zipped my bag closed once more and lugged it to the car. A box of books snuggled in the back of the Jeep beside my suitcase, inspiring books about finding purpose in life and embracing change, plus a mess of teen novels about kick-ass girls with Chuck Taylors, katana swords, and titanium hearts. A basket of essentials filled the passenger seat, road maps, an authentic leather Moleskine travel journal proving this was a serious trip, iPod loaded with travel-worthy music, and a Ziploc filled with a snack mix. A water bottle occupied one cup holder. The other holder cradled my new Wonder Woman coffee mug, left on my doorstep by an anonymous gifter 2 days earlier. I imagined sliding it across the counter at each stop, ordering robust coffees, but always with a smile. Baristas would see that Wonder Woman cup and nod. On the house, they'd say, recognizing I was a badass on an epic journey. Anonymously given gifts, like that Wonder Woman cup, had become fairly common over the months since my husband had died, especially in the school here in Tucson where we both had taught. I never really got used to receiving gifts from unknown benefactors. I guess it's a holdover from the days of bringing casserole to grieving family. Near the end of every month, for the rest of that school year, someone left a plastic grocery bag dangling from my classroom doorknob. Soy candles, pomegranate juice, kippers, dried seaweed strip, large pearl tapioca, strangely exotic gifts of nutrition, comfort, and kindness. One Friday, I found an iTunes gift card generous enough for a road trip's worth of songs in my mailbox. Another colleague even slipped some medicinal-grade marijuana into my car's glove box after I admitted to him I didn't sleep very well. Yes, in the spirit of research, I did smoke half a joint as I sat bundled in my blanket on my patio late one January night. But beyond an extensive appreciation of the stars and the strangest sense my butt did not want to leave my chair, I really didn't feel that much different. Okay, I was stalling. I tried another selfie. I blinked and smiled. Good enough. A post to Facebook heralded my official start. I turned the key and shifted the Jeep into reverse. Until that moment, I hadn't admitted, even to myself, that I could not envision coming back to Tucson. It's not that I was suicidal. I had, for the most part, wrestled that monster into its cage 6 months earlier. You see, sitting in a driveway at our old house one September evening, I knew exactly how, where, and when I'd kill myself. My husband, Matt, had died very unexpectedly, and I was shattered. It took more effort each day to move from house to car to school and back again. Panic strangled me with each transition. I dreaded the emotional glass walls I continually smashed into. The drive home each evening was a particular brand of torture without Matt. There were so many conversations left unshared. So that Thursday night, I never even made it into the house. I sat in that same driver's seat all night, my mind lost in the roaring emptiness without Matt, until the alarm on my phone jerked me back into reality, in time to change clothes and drive right back to school. You ever wonder what teachers think about while they work with your children? That day, we practiced fractions. I read chapters from a book to the class, and I listened to their chatter. But all the while, I was planning my end. After school, I drove home. I considered what supplies I would need, and I wrote up my suicide to-do list and went to bed. That was Friday. I decided it was going to happen Sunday night. I didn't sleep that night or the next. I just stared at the ceiling's fan blur, thinking. Not focused consideration of anything in particular, just vague ideas of family, friends, school, and always Matt. Like most nights in that half-emptied bed, my mind wandered. My thoughts skidded to a stop when I caught myself considering a long-term project for my students. I realized that if I can plan, if I can see anything beyond this moment, maybe I'm not quite ready to die. So around 3 that morning, I got dressed, tore up my suicide to-do list, and started a new one, a list of what's next. The first step was to find a new place to live, one that was all mine without all of these glass walls everywhere. Over those following months, I checked off nearly every item on that long list. 2 things remained: take a break from my life to reset my world and figure out who the hell I want to be. After such concrete tasks like taking Matt's clothes to Goodwill and settling taxes, these were exciting and absolutely terrifying. I realize this makes it sound do I keep going or not? because it makes it sound so simple. Just decide I don't want to die. It's not that I stopped feeling so hopeless and lost. I'm still staggered by how powerful grief can be, as if no time has passed at all. As Matt called our 16 years together, a second's eternity. It's more that when I am hit with a wave of heartache, it's less of a monster and more like an old friend I don't really like, but I can't help but love. I have love and support of extraordinary friends who grab my arms as I windmill at the edges of chasms into which I tumble. I still fall hard, but it's getting easier to find my balance again. I've learned how desperately I need goals, something to look forward to, something to nudge me out of bed and back into the world every fucking day. Anticipating my road trip gave me a goal to get through the rest of that school year, to survive saying goodbye to students and leave a school I'd come to love, to walk away from what was comfortable but heartbreaking. Now, I didn't intend to solo Thelma and Louise drive into the Grand Canyon or to overdose like an aging rock star in a hotel room. But when I tried to picture leaving Tucson, reaching Seattle, and turning back towards home, my mind just went blank. I imagined the static on the radio after Amelia Earhart disappeared over the Pacific, or when the cowboy rode off into the desert, into the sunset in the movies. I've never been satisfied with those images. Eventually, her plane ran out of gas, and the sun went down, leaving Amelia stranded and our cowboy out wandering in the dark. I tend to make up alternative endings for movies when I'm dissatisfied with a story. I simply walk away, deciding the characters went out for pizza and beer and became best friends. That lone cowboy was a problem, though. Invariably, I thought, but then what? Did he hide behind rocky outcroppings until the film crew left? Was he still wandering out there, stumbling in the dark? Did he eventually go home? Or did he find a new place to live? Did he have someone ship his stuff? Or did he restock at IKEA? How anticlimactic. But that's how I felt about this trip. This was my riding off into the sunset. Eventually, though, the interstate ends. I have to take a different highway or get left out in the dark, stumbling among cacti and lizards. Not nearly as romantic as the soft fade out in the movies. There's a quote from Reynolds Price I return to time and again. Strength just comes in one brand. You. Stand up at sunrise, meet what they send you, and keep your hair combed. I don't actually comb my hair, my curls are completely free range. But for that cowboy who wandered off into the sunset, there is a sunrise the next day. He and I might as well stand up and meet it. So much of this time without Matt has been unimaginable, but that's life, isn't it? We can't see beyond our own desperately clutched pain and sadness to see the wonders, and yes, the heartbreak that lies ahead of us. We have a choice: sit where we are, engulfed in a reality we can hardly bear, or once we ride off into that sunset, stand up again at sunrise, hit the road through the unimaginable to see what's there.
Sierra brought that story to us the first time at FIST, and I don't think there was a dry eye in the house. We are going to miss those free-range curls. Are you sure about Oregon, Sierra? You sure? I mean, what's a dream job, really? I mean, really. Thank you. That was beautiful. Our next storyteller is also no stranger to the stage. We have another FIST fan favorite. Andrea Carmichael is a bold leader for intersectional social justice. By day, she keeps the Community Foundation for Southern Arizona running, and by night, she is an avid community activist. She also chairs the UA LGBTQ Community Council, And she also finds time to do soccer and dance, which keeps her center and stable in this crazy time. Okay, so soccer and dance, that's the secret? Is that how we do it?
Yes.
That's it, okay. Take notes, people. In thinking of everything that Fiesta kind of stood for, there was one person I initially reached out to, personally, to see if they would be willing to submit, and you are about to hear from her now. Please welcome the fantastic Andrea Carmichael.
I'm not used to having a podium. I felt the chill winter air as I sat under the clear January night sky. Slowly, I fed the pages into the bonfire in front of me, the flames consuming each sheet. As I watched the words turn into ash, I experienced a sense of liberation. This act was so bold, so audacious. I'd never really been one to burn books before. I certainly had never considered burning my Bible, but here I was, doing just that. Faith provided a center point to my life from a young age. Faith, that is a set of religious beliefs and practices, provided the framework around which my life made sense. I started attending church before I even really knew what that meant. During elementary school, Bible Club anchored every Wednesday night during the school year. I'd spend a couple hours playing games and memorizing Bible verses. I was a good learner too. I used to have the trophies to prove it. From early on, faith for me meant believing in Jesus and the Bible as God's Word. In high school, my church provided my spiritual anchor as well as my social network. I looked forward to youth group every week. We had a lot of crazy fun. I could tell lots of stories, but that would take a while. In those high school years, faith became my life. I understood that the goal of life was to draw closer in a personal relationship with Jesus, and I sought to do that with all my heart. I read my Bible, I prayed daily, and I avoided all sorts of evil temptations, like that sex word that was mentioned earlier, secular music, alcohol, films that were too explicit, all that stuff. My friends and I would get together and we would have esoteric debates about how far is too far, and whether U2 could be considered a Christian music group. We did, really. I, along with most of my friends, attended public high schools, so it wasn't that I was totally shut off from the world outside of Christianity. But I still lived largely in a Christian bubble, and I was at home there. I had faith, and I belonged. When it came time to head to college, I chose to attend a private Christian liberal arts university in the Pacific Northwest. The university offered an ideal balance for me, being liberal enough to offer something more than 4 years of indoctrination, but still solidly grounded in the Christian faith that was so central to my life. During my 4 years there, my understanding of Christian faith expanded and deepened. But ironically, it was also in that Christian nest that the first sprouts of doubt began to appear. Up to that point, faith had always meant having certainty about God, about salvation, about life after death, about right and wrong, and about the Bible, which provided the answers to all these questions. But a mandatory class in the Old Testament threatened to dismantle this framework. But I wasn't ready to give it up. I put the doubts raised in that class in the far corners of my mind, dug in deeper, and committed myself anew to the faith that ordered my life. A couple years later, after completing my graduate degree, I decided that the next step was seminary. A couple years into the seminary program, an opportunity arose rather unexpectedly, to follow the vision I had long had for my life, which was to become a missionary. As a devout Christian, there was in my mind no higher purpose for my life than to share my faith with others. I spent 7 years living overseas, working in various capacities to further the cause of Bible translation and the message of Christian faith. My children, particularly my daughter, suffocated in the culture we lived in. But I failed to recognize it because I was dedicated to my faith. And if you're doing God's work, then you must be doing the right thing, even if it causes trauma to others. I pressed on, committed to my vision of a faith-filled life. Until suddenly, overnight, it all vanished. I received unexpected medical news concerning one of my children, and what had been intended as a summer vacation to visit family changed with no forewarning into a decision to remain in the U.S. permanently after living overseas for nearly 10 years. Everything I had invested my life in disappeared, and I found myself back in Tucson, abandoned by God, forgotten by the other missionaries I worked with, and neglected by those who had previously supported me. I opened the door on those long suppressed doubts and began to examine them. I wasn't looking to abandon my faith, but I certainly needed to reevaluate it. I stopped reading the Bible. After years of reading it routinely, I found that it had nothing meaningful to say to me. Initially, I intended to take a break for maybe a year or so. That was probably 5 years ago, and I haven't picked it up since. Prayer gradually dropped out of my routine. All my life I had prayed routinely. Now I could not see any point in doing so. Didn't seem that God really listened anyway. Even as I abandoned my spiritual practices, I continued attending church. It was such a routine part of my life and the cornerstone of my social community. I finally stopped attending about the time I embraced my identity. I realized at that point that I could not participate in a ritual I didn't believe in, nor was I willing to engage in a community in which I would not be truly welcome as myself. Despite all this, some remnant of faith lingered for a time. I couldn't quite bring myself to let go entirely of this framework that had structured my life and defined me for so long. But as I redefined myself, as I understood more and more clearly who I was, I acknowledged to myself that this faith no longer served me. About 2 years ago, I publicly shared this on my blog, which was, in some ways, just as much of a coming out as affirming my gender. It took me over a year after renouncing my faith to let go of the last external reminders of it. I had held on to old theology books and the multiple Bibles I had accumulated until early this year, when I understood that I was dragging them around like dead weight. For what purpose? They were a reminder of my past, a past that I had no interest in or intention of returning to. Why did I hang on to them? Which is why I found myself burning the pages of my Bible in a bonfire one winter evening. I thought that the flames of the fire would release me as easily as they consumed the pages of the book. If only it were so easy to let go of a lifetime of faith, of a worldview so deeply ingrained in you that it affects everything you think and do. Not all of that is bad. The kindness and compassion that infused my character were instilled in me in a large part through my faith community. But that same community also drove shame and self-rejection deep into my soul. Although I didn't understand and acknowledge my gender or my sexuality for most of my life, I lived in an environment that proclaimed in no uncertain terms that these were sinful. A former friend, upon learning of my transition, used the word abomination to describe me. I rejected the word when he threw it at me, but deep inside, I had already internalized it. By the time I came to accept myself, my soul had been already poisoned with the belief that I am something horrible. That the very God who created this universe and who created me, as I believed for much of my life, views me as someone so disgusting that I am worthy of hell. I internalized homophobia and transphobia long before I understood that in doing so, I was learning to hate my very self. Is it any wonder, really, that I needed to turn away from that faith? I wish that I could purge this feeling of shame from my soul as easily as I burnt the pages of the book that fueled those beliefs. Unfortunately, it's not that easy. Shame as a scarlet letter burned deep into my subconscious, and I continued to engage in the exhaustive self-work needed to heal and remove that poison. A toxin introduced by the very faith that I thought sustained me. I struggle to figure out what faith means to me now. I don't know how to rebuild my spirituality. I don't even know that I need to. I would love to stand here today and tell you that I've worked through all this shit and got everything all figured out. But I don't. Not by a long shot. Sometimes I miss the simplicity of my old faith. It provided a nice, orderly structure that helped answer the questions of life. Now I have no compass to guide me, except my internal one, which I was taught all my life to distrust. I may explore other expressions of faith. I may not. I don't know. I don't have to know. Where once I strived for certainty, now I live with my mind full of unanswered questions and a shitload of skepticism. One thing I know for certain, I cannot accept any expression of faith that loads any person with shame because of who they are. My faith, such as it is, has space for me to be loved for who I am and for me to love you for who you are. And I think that's a pretty solid place to start again.
We talk a lot about the stories that don't get a chance to be heard, and I think that is an incredible example of one right there. That was phenomenally powerful. Give it up one more time for Andrea. Our next storyteller is another remarkable woman. Marilyn Hines graduated from Radcliffe College and received her MD degree from the College of Physicians and Surgeons, Columbia University. She was the Associate Dean for Student Affairs at Wayne State University School of Medicine and Vice Dean and Professor of Pediatrics at the University of Arizona College of Medicine. She served as the first woman chair of the Group of Student Affairs of the Association of the American Medical Colleges. She belongs to many professional organizations and is also active in community organizations focusing on education, public health, and family and women's issues. And if all of that wasn't impressive enough, wait until you hear how she got there. A true pioneer and one of the women who we can truly look to and say, because of her, we can. Please welcome Dr. Marilyn Hines.
Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you.
Okay, can everybody hear me? Because this is about as loud as I can talk. Let me get my things here. Okay. I think I'm probably the oldest living WOSAC member, but as long as I'm still standing, I'm going to tell you my story. It's a personal story of a woman, changing woman living in a changing world. I was very fortunate to be born into a family that valued education and achievement, and even though my family's income was modest, they enabled me to have a Radcliffe education, which was a Harvard education in those days, and medical education with no student loans, which was really a great gift to me. I was not the typical Cliffy, as Radcliffe girls were called rather sarcastically by the Harvard gentlemen, and I wanted something different. A woman's highest goal in those years was motherhood, preceded, of course, by wifehood. In 1947, on our first day of college, the dean said to us we were there for only one purpose only, to become educated mothers for our children. Now, it's very interesting because Radcliffe did not deter me from my non-traditional goal. I had to plow ahead alone because there were no women role models there. I never thought of myself as a pioneer, but I guess I was one. In 1951, the year that I entered medical school, only 394 women in the whole country did so. In 2017, more than 21,000 women, representing 50.7% of all the matriculants, entered medical school. For the first time last year, the number of women enrolling in U.S. medical schools exceeded the number of men. Now, if I had known, it was a big event. If I had known in 1951 how rare an avis I was, I might have been too frightened to go, but I had no idea that I was among such a small group of women. Medicine, however, was definitely a man's world in those days. I look back at myself with amazement because in those years of pre-feminist innocence, I accepted without question and without any emotions the attitudes and treatments that today would lead to a lawsuit. And yes, I had my #MeToos, but I'm not going to talk about those. As a third-year medical student, we all had to have a clerkship in obstetrics and gynecology. The obstetrical on-call room for the male students had 4 beds and a bathroom with a shower. Because students were on call for a week, we could not leave the hospital for 7 days. I was assigned a cot in a closet-sized room, airless except for one window opening onto an air shaft shared by the quarters for research animals. I cursed the scientist who was using experimental roosters because no sooner had I fallen asleep after delivering a night's worth of babies than the roosters noticed the dawn. Even worse than no sleep was the promise of keeping clean. Women students had to use the bathroom down the hall that had no shower. Desperate conditions, they call for desperate measures. And for somehow I found the chutzpah to shoo all of the men out of their room and take over the shower. Now, that specialty of obstetrics gynecology deals only with women, but enlightenment came very slowly to this group of men. On the first day of our rotation, the head of the department introduced the course thusly: with apologies to the young women attending this lecture to become physicians, the function of a young woman is to have babies. Well, I was a good student, so I write down the function of young women is to have babies. Any of you guys ever have a retroactive consciousness raising episode? I can say it. What happened was that I suddenly, 18 years later, as I was walking to the hospital, that remark about women function to have babies somehow raised itself into my consciousness as I was hurrying to the hospital. I was so enraged at that time that if I had seen that man, I would have kicked him in the balls. Now, my last year of medical school brought a moment of panic. I felt confident that I could do medicine, but suddenly had qualms about, gee, what was it like to be a woman doctor? Marriage, children, all these questions in my mind. I boldly asked a woman faculty member on the PEDS faculty with one child and another on the way to invite me to her home. I was so glad to see her manage all of this that I overlooked how tough it must have been to be pregnant, work all day, come home to mother a toddler, and entertain an anxious medical student. Only later would I understand the enormous challenge of juggling two lives. I guess I continued to be a pioneer. I was the first woman to head a department at Detroit Receiving Hospital, first woman to serve as an associate dean and then vice dean at 2 medical schools, first woman to chair the group on student affairs, and the first woman to chair a committee of the American Hospital Association. This isn't important, except that women finally managed to creep into some of the higher areas. However, the real pioneer in the family was my husband. He not only allowed me to do my own thing, but was also a continuous source of unconditional encouragement and support. And he gave me the gift of mobility so that I could decide where to take a job and live. And it was right here. I've been here for almost 39 years. One day when I came home from work, my husband accused me of having my period every week because I was so irritable on Tuesday after the dean's staff meeting. Obviously, many can guess, Pat I'm sure can guess, Sheila can guess, I was the only woman in the room. When I said something, it was ignored, but approved when a man said it. That was another kind of Me Too, and I really understand why I was so damn irritable. I'm grateful that my children put up with me. I was the only mother on the block that went to work. A neighbor asked, "How can you bear to leave your adorable daughter at home all day with a colored help?" thereby crowding both racism and sexism in a 17-word question. Another episode, my daughter, who was then in medical school, joined me at dinner with 2 women physicians. They were colleagues of mine, and while we reminisced about managing medicine and motherhood, my daughter spoke up. "You know what the worst thing I remember was?" My heart sank. I thought, I'm going to get it. I'm really going to get it now. In middle school, I had to take the bus alone to go to the orthodontist, and it was scary. And I was the only kid in the waiting room whose mother wasn't there. All 3 of us women doctors offered much sympathy, but secretly, I was very happy that my parenting sins were so venial. I've been doing research. It's sort of a hobby of mine. I could share more personal stories, but in the interest of time, I'm going to shift to this hobby. It's research into what I call the double burden of women, career plus motherhood. The relatively recent evolution of motherhood, with a capital M, started in the 17th century when kinship ties weakened and the nuclear family arose. Then came the concept of childhood with the revival of education and the moralization of society. Next, industrialization separated the workplace from the home. Somebody had to take care of the kiddies, so fathers very nobly entrusted the upbringing of their children to their wives. Historian Gina Morant Sanchez spoke at a conference that I convened here during the University of Arizona Centennial. and she said, and I quote, "Between 1750 and 1850, industrialization transformed the social meaning of gender roles. An ideology of domesticity glorified the separation of home and public life and extolled the female qualities of nurturing, moral superiority, and maternity. The world of men was the public place sphere, while the world of women was private. That women's sphere was extolled by Catherine Beecher, Beecher, B-E-E-C-H-E-R, 1800 to 1875, who glorified housekeeping as work assigned to women by nature and by God. Beecher described women's work as duties of infinite variety, providing constant intellectual stimulation and good exercise. She claimed that 10 years of study and teaching had ruined her health, but she regained it by doing domestic labor, thus making housework the equivalent of a 20th century health club. I wrote in 1997, "We must move to rapidly provide working parents with child care and parental leave policies. We need enlightened architects to design living complexes with neighborhood child care and concierge to accept packages and let in the repair person. We need universal preschool and regulated early child care. We need schools to provide a menu of after-school child care." And then my last column in that paper was, "I have a vision for the future. In the 21st century, women will continue on the path to equal access in all education and career opportunities. Women will have increasing opportunities for advancement as the glass ceiling first cracks and then shatters. And there will be an abatement of the double burden carried by women who choose to have both children and a career." I'm going to end with a question. Are we there yet? Thank you for being such an attentive group of people listening, and I'm glad I had the opportunity to talk to you all.
Thank you, Marilyn. Marilyn is also the co-founder of WOSAC, so thank you for being one of our founding members. And you want to talk about putting cracks in the glass ceiling. Thank you also for being one of the first people to put those cracks in. Thank you, Marilyn. Our last storyteller of the afternoon is Hannah Robb. She is a queer feminist writer, social worker, lover of cats, food, and Tucson sunshine. She carries the sentiment, "The personal is political," throughout her ongoing recovery from an eating disorder and intergenerational alcoholism. She's going to share a little bit about that journey with us today, and she forgot to add brave and courageous to her bio, which is what it takes to lay those journeys bare before a group of strangers. She is currently a first-year master's student in clinical social work at Columbia University. Bringing us home this afternoon, please welcome to the stage the incredible Hannah Robb.
I was not a child who was comfortable in her body. There's an element of normalcy to this, the process of getting older, how our bodies change over time without permission, the jarring feelings of being on display. I am 4. My best friend Kayla and I weigh ourselves on her mom's scale in the bathroom. She steps on, the screen tells us 40 pounds. I step on, more than 40 pounds. I want to melt into the tile of the bathroom to hide the shame I feel about my 4-year-old body. The feeling of big, how wrong it feels to be big. I was the first one in my group of friends to get my period, the 7th grade, 12. I get home from school, go to the bathroom to pee, sit and gasp, stare doe-eyed at the blood that comes from me. Then a rush to my mother, who kissed me on both cheeks, held me, got pads, and said, "Hannah, I am so proud of you." My father brings me flowers because he is one of the good ones. I loved bleeding, loved being a female-bodied person, loved knowing that I could create with, sustain with this body that, although much too big, was revered by me, by all of us who really see women. Getting my period for the first time felt like an opening, this concept of womanhood, a lighted path to follow. However many times I had scorned my body until then, cried in dressing rooms, Googled liposuction for elementary school girls, ? I knew deep down that my body was capable, life-giving, miraculous. I know the term thin is arbitrary and relative and problematic, and I'm using it anyway. I was never a thin girl. What I mean to convey is that I was bigger than most girls around me during puberty. I was bigger than the girls in my class, on the swim team, bigger than the girls I saw on book covers and in toy aisles and on the Disney Channel. The feeling of difference, that was the bothersome part. The feeling of not seeing my body's processes reflected in the girls around me. I watched my classmates, their lightheartedness, running around in bathing suits on field day, chasing after the ball in PE, stripping off clothes in front of each other at sleepovers, eating when they were hungry and stopping when they were full. I knew nothing of it. I felt removed from the female-bodied girls who hadn't yet begun to see, feel their breasts, their visibility, the attention they attracted, being told by teachers I needed to wear a bra, the snap of a bra strap on my shoulder, boys scurrying away, comments about my little buds, the headspace it consumed to be in a body that was constantly commented on and scrutinized by someone. I get called fat on 2 occasions by boys I have crushes on in elementary school. I remember the feeling, at once hazy and acute, of being stomped on, pretending to laugh because I was cool and violent words were funny. I wake up sobbing afterward for days and days. Too big, too much, and in my body, never enough, the confirmation of my fears. The plight of so many women, believing that masculine people's opinions are of utmost importance. Approval is vital, crucial, and failure to achieve approval means one thing: personal inadequacy. Years later, I read Laura Mulvey's theories on the male gaze, the ways that women and girls are constructed for the pleasure of the male viewer, how men do the looking and women are to be looked at. My heart, a popped balloon. It was a slow burn, but the sense that I needed to shrink was lodged in my mind. A few years of simmering and it came to the fore. The end of my freshman year of high school, the beginning of my anorexia. I started restricting foods: iceberg lettuce, mustard instead of salad dressing, copious amounts of black coffee, running up and down dirt roads on the far east side, weighing myself 10 times a day, my circle of friends dwindling, pangs of hunger jolting me awake in the middle of the night. I began to see myself shrinking. It felt so good, like relief, like permission to exist finally. Boyfriends picking me up and carrying me around, sitting down without hyper-awareness of my stomach falling over my pants, my collarbones jutting out, obsessively running my fingers over them to remind me. Becoming smaller and smaller, my teachers and doctors and friends and coaches becoming concerned for me, my female organs shutting down, the loss of my beloved period, my hair falling out in clumps, passing out in dance class, my bones beginning the onset of osteopenia, my heart painfully palpitating on the treadmill in a hot garage. I am safe. I will be approved of. Boys will love me. I will never be called fat again. I will never feel too big again, too much again. I am so enough now that I am starving, now that I am shrinking. I wish I could tell you this didn't go on for long, but I can't, and it did. interspersed with periods of relief and revelation and moments of slow progress, I lived a half life for many years, a ghost life, a life in which I felt such numbness, such separation, like I was floating above myself and the world, waiting but not wishing to be pulled back down. Now I have to tell you that eventually it got better. I have to tell you that when it came time for me to begin healing, it was not a doctor. It was not a masculine person, not a young boy or a man or a book or a therapy modality. It was a woman. I have to tell you how women saved my life, how women continue to save my life. Floating, starving, comparing, criticizing, evading, a 19-year-old at the exact moment I needed it most, God held my face in her hands and gave me the greatest gift I never knew I wanted. Strong women. A group of women showed me the way. You know the way. Snapshots in my psyche. In awe, as Melissa seamlessly responds to a male photographer who, while soliciting her help on a project, says in a patronizing tone, "So, you want to be a photographer?" And she stares blankly and says, "No, I am a photographer." He looks away. Another, Sarah describes how she cooks beautiful food for herself because she deserves it. Another, Savannah exclusively has sex with people who worship her body, everything it was and is and can be. She has orgasms. I wonder to myself, what is that kind of sex even like? After years of withering, of cutting myself down, selling myself short, allowing my worth to be determined by the way I looked, the feedback I got from men in this world that they dominate, I suddenly had women in my life who knew how to say no to it all. No to toxicity, to oppressive notions of female bodies, to starvation, to diet culture, to being patronized and condescended, to internalized sexism and misogyny, to men and their incessant unwillingness to try, to any and all things that insult who we are as women, as people. Maybe they would be surprised by the way I'm telling this story. Maybe they didn't know the effect they had on me. That's the thing, the eternally mystifying quality of women. Our ability to influence the world around us the moment we dare to sink into ourselves, the moment we stop accepting all the terrible things we never deserved. These moments, these women, opened me up. The feeling of first seeing my own blood. If I was going to heal, if I was going to learn how to live in my body, this would be the way. The presence of these women and all the women who come after them. This is the distinct quality of coming home, a path lighting my feet, like returning to myself, a part that had survived despite all that had been done to demolish it. This is a story of healing begun, a story that won't end, that will continue today and every day, in myself, my identity as a woman, my flesh and my blood, every curve, every word I don't hold back, the softness of my body, its roundedness, squishiness, these things I couldn't stand before, now my deepest and most visceral joys. I want to thank every woman who has ever loved me, every woman who has told her story, used her voice, stood up for what was right when it wasn't easy, every woman who has demanded more, who has said no, who has said yes, every woman who has endured and endured. I want to thank every woman who has survived, and by extension has taught me to survive. I want to hold you and kiss your cheeks and bring you a flower and say thank you.
So I think you can tell, especially after that, storytelling has the power to move, the power to transform, and absolutely the power to heal. So thank you, Hannah, for that incredible piece. that concludes our Fiesta storytelling program here today. On behalf of WOSAC and everybody who helped organize this incredible event, and especially Lee Spencer, where is she? Everybody give a hand to Lee. Without her, none of what we could do would be able to happen. For those of you interested in joining WOSAC, we would like that very much. Our memberships are always open. Please see Lee with more information about that. And thank you all for coming out here today. For those of you interested in being Fiesta storytellers, you are more than welcome to do so. We will be doing this next year. And for those of you who enjoyed what you saw here today, there are more storytelling opportunities. There is always FIST, Female Storytellers. If any of you saw what happened up here today and thought, I think I have a story to tell, you are right, you do, emphatically. You can see myself, Lee. We also have our Director of Philanthropy here, Melanie Madden. I think she's hiding out in a corner there. She also works at the university. You can ask her. And there is another representative here from Odyssey Storytellers. FIST is a little more exclusive. We are for women, queer, feminist, trans writers. Odyssey is open to everybody. Male, female, co-ed, and Steve Braun, Steve, raise your hand, represents Odyssey. You can also ask him. And that's it, gang. We are having a champagne toast over at The Dutch that November has organized for us. So feel free to follow us over there. Thank you once again for being a part of our community. And that's it. So thank you all so much for coming out and supporting our storytellers. Please consider being one yourself. Thank you. And actually, could we have our storytellers come up on stage for a photo? Patricia, Sierra, Andrea, Marilyn, and Hannah. And everybody give them all one more round of applause because they were phenomenal. Yes. And